Okay, I want you to settle a debate.
Okay.
Um, do humans undergo skeletal muscle fiber hyperplasia vis-a-vis weight training?
Oh my God. Yeah, so I know you were a proponent of that, or last I checked up on your write-ups and your online content. Boy, oh boy, I wish I would have done just a tad bit more homework on that, because there was a recent publication. I can't think of where I freaking saw this, but the math seems to work out. And I've seen it before. So again, I don't know this group. It was, I think, in the mid 2000s, but they had looked at anabolic steroid users, and they had taken trapezius biopsies, right? So based on the sort of muscle mass, and then if you sort of consider, okay, well, the fibers are this large, and then you scale all this to calculate fiber number, there seems to be something there, right? In terms of more fibers. Now, then the argument goes, well, was it just that weightlifters were born with more fibers, which you clearly can't answer that question. All of that being said, these are just counterpoints I'm bringing up. You do seem to see obviously larger muscle mass in weightlifters, and the fiber size is also larger. But when you say, okay, based on those two components, weightlifters do have more fibers, right? Because you can scale all this into math. You see that time and time again. Based on some of the animal work, if you believe that muscle is conserved across mammals and you see evidence of fiber splitting in the rodent, I don't see as to why it would not happen in humans. Now, when I say hyperplasia, that has different, sort of potential there. One form of hyperplasia would be satellite cells being activated and fusing together to form a new fiber, right? And some evidence of that would be, okay, if you look at muscle under a microscope, and we have people that are weightlifting, and we take serial biopsies, week after week after week after week, some of those muscle fibers that are small, they're going to express proteins which would indicate that they're kind of novel cells. So like embryonic myosin heavy chain would be one of those markers. You see that. I mean, you can count a small percentage, but with weightlifting, you'll see that occur. So that's a little bit of evidence to suggest that, hey, we could have a new fiber here, right? And that could be born from satellite cells that are activated and fusing together. The other thought is that once a fiber gets really large, it may just split and create two daughter myofibers or muscle cells. The evidence from that, or of that, comes from there again, this 2005, I think, paper, Erickson et al., and I need to do a better job with the senior author. But you see under a microscope that if we are viewing muscle in cross section, the cell membranes will start sort of invaginating, and you have centrally located nuclei, which would indicate that you're seeing the process of a fiber splitting in that cross section. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, well, just sorry to interrupt you, but I one of my papers on progressive stretch overload, I actually followed a muscle fibers, through
serially.
Yeah, and basically looked at the largest fiber. We had fibers that were, and a lot of people can't relate to these numbers, but it was, I think the largest we measured was like 24,000 square microns, right? So gigantic. So that's huge, right? Yeah. So I was able to follow a lot of these large fibers in serial cross sections, and they do start to sort of split out. And not that they tend to, they actually do, because I'm following it. And it seems like once you get beyond like 20,000, square microns, it won't get any larger. So that might, to my knowledge, that's the only paper that looked at the concept of critical cell size. I haven't seen any. And you mentioned, you're talking about one in the 2000s, and I'm not familiar with that paper, but
I'll try to find it. Do you guys have show notes you can link to?
I don't think so.
All good. I would not know how to set that up, so don't ask me.
Okay.
But I'll send it to you. I'll send it to both you, Tony and Joey, and
that would be wonderful.
Whatever you want to do with that, if you want to do a write-up on it or whatever. But if you're steroid users, So that's the caveat there, right? And then people are like,
Right.
oh, well, it's in steroid users. And I'm like, yeah, but again, who
It's
cares?
still hypertrophy and
Yeah,
hyperplasia.
exactly. Exactly. It just accelerated muscle growth at this point, right?
Right.
Still
Right.
the cell splitting, et cetera. So yeah.
And gentlemen, do you think there may be a possibility here that it also could be age contingent? So let's say the stimulus happens earlier in life, maybe 15 or 16 years of age, as opposed to 25 or 30. Just like at that given age, neurogenesis is greater in the brain, right? Oh, so
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a potential age component that if a younger individual is subjected to, you know, various stimulus regarding loading, and maybe there's a greater propensity there. I don't know, but it may be possible.
Yes. So to your point, well, ethically we can't do that, right? We can't take biopsies out of kids, but
No, exactly.
you always hear about, oh, that kid grew up on a farm, right? He was carrying buckets, traps up to his ears. I've heard that argument. Doesn't have to lift much, just looks like a beast all the time. No, I think that's a very, very fair point. And again, so I'm going to sell the rodent model, right? So you can manipulate the rodent model to answer that sort of question and then sort of extrapolate it out. But I know John McCarthy, they were tinkering, and he's at Kentucky, part of that muscle biology group. They were tinkering with maturation of the animal, doing synergist ablation. They have a really cool genetic mouse model where they can knock out satellite cells. So when you put something in their water, it basically kills satellite cells. And this is a genetic sort of modified animal to do this, right? Initially, they said, hey, look, once we give this component in the water, we kill satellite cells, and then we do synergist ablation. Apparently, muscle doesn't need satellite cells for hypertrophy. And everybody's like, whoa, that's freaking crazy. So then Gunderson's group, he's over in Europe. They replicated the study and they said, no, you do need satellite cells because we didn't replicate the findings. Come to find out, it's this really nuanced thing where McCarthy had done like more mature animals. So once they sort of reached kind of not like peak lifetime muscle mass, but they had accrued, you know, adulthood muscle mass, if you will. Whereas Gunderson, they did a little bit younger. There was a difference there. So I think that doesn't directly speak to what you're saying, Tony, but what it does is sort of indirectly imply that age certainly matters when you overload, and it could be affecting the muscle cell splitting and that sort of thing.